one of the franchises that we've paid the most attention to is the MCU universe. Um, I don't know about how much you paid attention to it recently. I haven't, but at least for a time, like, I mean, it was something we all followed and saw the films for, like many, many other people. And granted, we've said about, well, how would you assess those films, I guess?
Well, so this is going to be my transition from, I suppose, I guess we'll just call them standalone films, uh, for the purposes of having a term for it, even though that's not really what that term means, into our potential discussion on adaptations and franchises. So
Sure, let's do it.
most everything that I have on the list here is an adaptation. There's a couple of things that are original but are still franchises. So the MCU, again, a big enough topic for an entire conversation in and of itself, or multiple conversations, multiple episodes of the podcast. But I think judging films of the MCU, there are many that are genuinely good films and that are judging, based on the criteria which we have set forth, many that actually are good films. And I think one of the good things that the MCU does is sort of prove my point about, it's not necessarily the director that makes the film. In some ways, it can be. In those cases, in some ways, it is an actor, but not for the purposes, not for the sake of, oh, I'm going to see this movie because Chris Evans is in it. It's, oh, Chris Evans happens to have been cast as Captain America for the duration of this franchise.
Hmm.
So I'm going to see Captain America. I'm going to see the character that he's playing, and he is the consistent actor playing this character, even though he did a spectacular job. Like, that's not to say that his performance was not as good as it could have been. It was spectacular. Same thing with Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man, or with Chris Hemsworth and Thor. Just to briefly say, some of my favorite movies in the MCU, the ones that I genuinely liked, and ones that I actually think are very, very good, are ones that a lot of people think are mid or not great. And a lot of that is sometimes that's coming off of like hardcore comic book nerds that think everything has to be exactly the way that they envision. And I haven't really. The last MCU movie that I went to see in theaters was Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, which I thought was pretty good. It was at least enjoyable, and there was a good fight. I think that one was kind of ruined by the ending as well, um, which I'll get to in a second.
Mm-hmm. You're caught up
And
more
it's
than
a
me, though. I
conversation
think
that
the
I've had
last,
with another mutual friend of ours
hmm, I think the
about
last one I
why
saw in theaters
these.
was Endgame.
What was the last one you saw in theaters?
Endgame.
Okay, yeah, good place to stop. Shang-Chi's not a terrible movie, but Endgame was a good place to stop. I think to judge the MCU as a whole, there is sort of a suffering from a lack of cohesion. They shouldn't have all been directed by the same director, because that's not possible. The whole thing would have taken 40 years to accomplish what they did in like 10 if they wanted the same director. But I think there was a lack of communication story wise, as far as uh, the kind of things that we wanted done or that were supposed to have been done. And also just Disney being Disney likes to, sit up here and then go, nope, you can't do that, do this instead. Which, interestingly enough, the MCU started under Paramount. And I would be kind of curious to see where it had gone, where it would have gone if Paramount had been allowed to continue owning it. But I think there are many that are good films. There are many that are just really, honestly, trash, garbage films. Some of the ones that are good, Captain America, all three Captain America movies, I think are excellent. The three Iron Man movies, first Iron Man is very good. The other two are pretty good. Now, for the Thor movies, if I was to judge them as movies, and particularly as movies, within the spectrum of the character and the overall story, I think people are going to hate me for this. I think Thor: The Dark World is actually an excellent movie.
Hmm.
It is very well done. I think there is excellent character development. It's a much more subtle movie. The action isn't like, it's a little over the top, but it's not excessively over the top. And no, I think it stands on its own 2 feet relatively well, just as a film. I thoroughly enjoy it. Also, just because I like the character of Thor, I like what happens with him. I like what happens with Loki in that movie too. Um, and that's my favorite of just the actual Thor films. Thor Ragnarok, he learns a lesson, and there is technically some good character development that happens there. But Taika Waititi does not take the character of Thor seriously at all. He makes him the butt of the joke as often as he possibly can, and that has a tendency to take away from the actual serious moments of the movie. Is when you put jokes in at the wrong place or make them far too often. When you're supposed to be making an epic action movie and you wind up making an action comedy instead. But
Okay.
I don't know. That's just sort of my overall opinion of the MCU. I think it was a good thing in general, because I don't know if it's necessarily the first time, but it's the first time to my knowledge that that people actually got together and said, hey, what if we had a whole bunch of movies that are not necessarily linearly connected, but are all related to the same overarching story and all lead into this one big event. And I think that's, with Infinity War and Endgame, if we had them just by themselves, they would be terrible. But with the buildup of all the other movies leading into them, I think they work really, really well. Because it's like if you tried to take the end of a series, if you tried to take the last Stormlight Archive book or the fifth Stormlight Archive book and judge it by itself, which I haven't even read it yet. I need to finish going through the other ones so I can read it properly in sequence. But if you understand what I'm saying,
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. It's been a while since I've seen the films, but I see slash imagine what you mean by
yeah,
if you took Infinity War and Endgame, um, and you put them in a vacuum outside of everything else and just judge them that way, like it would not. Yeah, it wouldn't be the same.
yeah, they would probably fail. But on the backs of all the other movies, they're done very, very well. And I think that they do qualify as good films. Many of them do qualify as good films. And Infinity War and Endgame probably qualify as good films. It's been a while since I've seen them, but from what I do recall, they do qualify as good films from our criterion that we've laid down.
Yeah, fair enough. What would your favorites be if you had to pick? I think if I had to pick mine, I'd have to watch them again because my opinion is not as informed as it otherwise could be. But two I would just list off the top of my head: Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and the first Iron Man movie. And those two are really good.
So I will also say Captain America and the Winter Soldier, as I think that is my absolute favorite MCU film, period. And I think it actually is just the best because it's one that stands as a sequel, as a movie within a sequence related to other movies, as a hook for a third one, and also, or as a hook for later movies, and also as its own movie, just by itself. Because going into it, really the only thing that you absolutely need to know is that they pulled Captain America out of the ice, and he was in love with a girl back in the 40s that's now super old and has Alzheimer's. So those are kind of my reasons for that one being my top favorite. I think Ant-Man is another one that worked really well. Captain America: Civil War, another one of my favorites, purely because of, I think people like Civil War and people that side with Captain America are the same people that side with the samurai in the Battle of Shirayama is because I might be wrong, but I'm going to stand here and fight for what I think is right anyway.
Yeah, Civil War would be number 3 probably for me. It's a very good film.
So I would say those two are probably my favorite. Yeah, I'll go with actually MCU movies overall. I would say Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And this is also an unpopular opinion, but I'm probably going to say Avengers Age of Ultron.
Say more, I guess.
So that one, I think, unrightly has the bad reputation of being the worst Avengers movie of the ones that had previously been made. Like between the first one, it itself, Endgame, or Infinity War and Endgame. And I've even heard some people say that it is just the worst movie of the MCU, which they were then proven wrong when Captain Marvel came out and they were like, oh no, it can be worse. So I always like that when a movie is not that bad, but everybody thinks it's terrible, and a genuinely bad movie comes out and they're like, oh no, it can be worse. Or even a movie that's genuinely just blah or meh. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so I like Age of Ultron because it is one of the movies of the MCU that probably has the highest or the biggest takeaway, because Ultron is created as to protect the Earth, but he is created too well, and he is created using an implement that his creator does not fully understand. There's sort of the lesson in there of against the against progress idea that I have, where with every new technology, we shouldn't just be immediately putting the pedal to the floor and taking it to its absolute limits and just off the cuff doing what we think we should do immediately. And a lot of that is because Scarlet Witch was manipulating Iron Man's fears and playing off of them. But, he's exactly this type of person to do that. Where it's like, nope, we're just going to put the pedal to the floor and we're just going to use this thing, whatever it is, even though we don't really know what it is. I found it inside Loki's magic scepter, and I'm not sure what that is. We don't know what this is or where it came from, but we're going to pattern an artificial intelligence off of it and potentially let it take control of our artificial intelligence, which
A
was a
high
supremely
IQ and
bad
not high
idea.
wisdom play.
Yeah, it was a supremely bad idea from the start, and Banner tries to convince him otherwise, but he is far too weak-willed to be able to stand up to Tony Stark's brashness. So he winds up getting pulled along for the ride too. And they do this without the knowledge of anybody else, because we know if this ever gets brought up, both Captain America and Thor are probably going to be going, no, bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
And probably just everybody there, because everybody else actually has common sense, is probably just going to go, no, this is not a good idea. And Captain America literally just sunk a wreck in the Potomac that illustrates why you shouldn't be creating weapons of mass destruction ostensibly for protection, because if they ultimately they probably wind up falling into the wrong hands. People have objected to Age of Ultron because Ultron makes himself try to seem like a religious figure in parts. He's explaining to the twins that why the church is in the exact center of the city. And when he gets the vibranium, he says, on this rock I will build my church. But I'm like, yes, but the devil also quotes scripture.
Well, it makes them all the more evil.
Yeah, it's because he has misquoted scripture. Like the devil also can quote scripture, so it's like you can have a bad guy quote scripture
Mm-hmm.
because the devil does that in scripture, as long as he's then corrected. But I think overall, if I was to give the MCU a percentage rating, just so we can move on from the topic, just like a percentage rating for just quality and talking about from Iron Man to Endgame, I'd probably give it a solid 76.5%
Okay.
for overall quality, because there's a lot more hits than there are misses, and because of the source material that you're operating off of, there are times when it does something really good for that movies based on source material ought to do, which is do things that fans are expecting to see, and also do things that fans weren't expecting to see and didn't know they wanted until that moment. Because like in Age of Ultron, everybody's trying to see if they're no, briefly, everybody's trying to see if they're worthy to lift Thor's hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain America puts his hand on it and it moves. And they're like the two ways of interpreting that is he is worthy and he could have lifted it, but he didn't want to break Thor's spirit. He didn't want to make Thor feel bad, so he didn't. Or that he was not quite worthy yet. That he was very close to being worthy, but not quite, which is that's the theory that I have. That's my personal method of interpreting that. Because in some ways, Captain America is still a little bit ideal, and he hasn't quite suffered enough in the right ways to be made into a man that is worthy of carrying that hammer or of lifting that hammer. And then when he lifts it in Endgame, everybody is like, I didn't know I wanted that, but that was awesome.
And it made sense
Which
still.
was basically my reaction. It was uh, much more animated than that, but that was basically my reaction. It was like, I had no idea I wanted this so bad. I had no idea that I wanted Captain America with Thor's powers so bad.
I'm still stuck on how he might not have been worthy yet, because that also begs a question, which is how is Thor worthy to begin with? How has he suffered enough? I know he's like died and all, but then again, Captain America got frozen in the ice. Like, eh, it. He has his Thor has his story in the first Thor movie about how he becomes worthy, and fair enough.
I
But
think it's just
it seems
ultimately
like
his
Captain
willingness
America's
to lay
done
down his
just as good,
life.
just as much, if not more. So, is there a relative scoring for members of or denizens of Asgard versus denizens of Earth? How is this morality scale supposed to work?
This is not something that I have fully fleshed out in my head. That's just the one that sounds better.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was writing the story, that is what I would have. That's how I would tell it. Rather than him actually being worthy the whole time, but he's sparing his friend's feelings.
Makes sense.
Because that's a little bit it's a little it's just a little bit too soft-handed for me, to be honest. It was like I like the no, you're not quite worthy yet.